welcome to the Briefing Room, videos dedicated to the tactics behind Star Wars Legion. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the humble T-47 Airspeeder. Recently, the Airspeeder has copped a lot of flack. People do not think it's competitive, they don't think it's useful, they think running the unit is a waste of time, and I think this is because they're comparing it to an ATST. Well, I'm here today to hopefully change some of those perceptions and have a look at what the T-47 truly offers. One thing is a fact, though. This thing is not an ATST. The Airspeeder, the T-47, does not compare and cannot be used in the same role as the beefed up, huge weapon-wielding ATST. It is a completely different unit. Yes, it has armor, but that's pretty much where the similarities stop. So people have to stop using an Airspeeder like an ATST, and they'll find that they'll get a lot more out of it. So before I get into that and how to play with it, I'm going to discuss the cards and the options. I'm going to discuss the downsides, what army I would run it in, and then finally, is it actually competitive? To start off, let's have a good look at the T-47 Airspeeder card. So this unit is 175 points. It has the armor keyword, which of course means that only crits affect it. It has Arsenal 2, which means it can fire 2 weapons. I'll talk a bit more about that later. It has cover 1. Fantastic. It is immune to blast and melee. Being immune to melee is very significant. Not so much in the current meta, but maybe in the future. It has Speeder 2, which means, of course, it does its mandatory move, and it can ignore terrain that is height 2 or lower. Now, it has 7 health, not that much, only 1 more than a very, very less expensive AT-RT. It has a resilience. Is it resilience or resistance? I can just never remember. Let's say resilience. I feel good about resilience. It has a resilience value of 5. It has a white defense device and a defensive surge to blocks. It is speed 3. It has a few upgrades you can see there. Most importantly is that it has the upgrade, the comm upgrade that allows you to take H-cup links, which I'll talk about soon. It has its weapon. The double laser cannon is actually single-handedly the best weapon in the game. Now, people kind of forget this. No other weapon has range 1 to 3, 3 black dice, and 3 red dice, with fixed front and impact 3. That is so powerful. It's better than the ATST's main cannon, given the ATST can then take further weapons, whereas the weapons that you can take for the Airspeeder out the back, maybe not so useful. We'll discuss that in a minute. But the laser cannon out the front is the most powerful weapon we've currently got in Legion. Do not underestimate it, and certainly a reason to look at the Airspeeder in the first place. So, the upgrades. First, you've got the ground buzzer, which is probably the only one I'd take, and even then, maybe not. Mainly because it's 20 points and only range 2. I recently played a bunch of games with the Airspeeder, and shooting out the back, I got really excited, and then worked out range 2 just isn't as far as you want it to be. There's only going to be so many options to shoot out the back, and you're going to be putting your Airspeeder sometimes in compromising positions to try and use it in the first place to get the best out of that 20 points. I mean, 20 points, that's half a Rebel Trooper unit, right? So, look, the weapon itself is pretty good. It has 4 black dice, range 1 to 2, which hurts, but 4 black dice is pretty good. But for 20 points, I honestly would not take the ground buzzer when running my T-47, and I certainly would not take the power harpoon. Once again, range 1 to 2, 1 red dice, impact 1, kind of cool, fixed rear, and with a tow cable. So after a vehicle is wounded by an attack that includes this weapon, perform a pivot with that vehicle. So you've only got 1 dice to start with, so you have to hit with it. You've got to be within range 1 or 2 of a vehicle out the back, noting that you're going to want to be shooting at vehicles with your front laser cannon. Then you have to wound it, so you have to get past this armor save, and then you can pivot it. It's a whole lot of meh. I think it's too janky. I love the idea. I love the theme of it, but I think it's way too jank to actually work. So I will not be running power harpoons on my Airspeeders. We, of course, then, the other upgrade that is worth looking at is Wedge Antilles, which is the repulsor vehicle only Rebel pilot. He is exhaustible, and the action is that free action. Until the end of your activation, you gain full pivot, which is pretty cool. Look, pivot still counts as a move. So you're going to be coming around anyway. Is it useful? sometimes, and for only 5 points, definitely worth looking at. I found that by the time I want to use this, my airspeeder may or may not be dead. So I wouldn't stress about using wedge. Look, if you have 5 points left over at the end of building your army, definitely chuck it in over something else. But maybe you want to give a unit impact grenades instead, and that might end up being hugely more useful. Up to you. Look, I think it's cool. Love wedge. Love everything wedge is about in the expanded universe in the background. So if you want to have them in your army, go nuts. It may or may not come in handy. The main upgrade, however, that I think will help the T-47 does not come in its box. It comes in the future expansions, the turret expansions, and that is HQ uplink. So a big problem I have with the airspeeder when I was playing with it was that I would get ahead of the rest of my army and very quickly out of the range of my commander. And this is when I was using Luke. So if I'm only using Leia in an army, which is very likely, she's going to be hanging back a bit and your airspeeder is going to be out of her command range very, very quickly. So being able to give your airspeeder an order with HQ uplink at that moment where you just need it to go before that ATST to get those few shots in before it is blown out of the sky is extremely useful. And for 10 points, that is the probably single upgrade I would be putting in my T-47 airspeeder to keep it as cheap as possible, 185 points. So when HQ uplink comes out, hopefully we'll see a few more of these on the table doing a bit more work. So that is the T-47 card and your upgrade options. Now let's talk about how to play with an airspeeder. Lesson 1. Never run 2 airspeeders. Just don't do it. You may think you want to do it. You may think it looks cool on the table, but it's a terrible idea. I played 3 or 4 games recently with 2 airspeeders. I had a really fun time. They looked really cool. The idea was great. I did not win many of those games. And certainly my airspeeders did not earn their points back. What they did do was get destroyed. And what they didn't do was capture objectives, because in most missions, of course they can't. So my first advice for running T-47 airspeeders is just run one. Just one, that's enough. It'll do what it does, and 2 limits the rest of your army far too significantly. Lesson 2. Do not run your airspeeder head-to-head with an ATST. You will lose it. It will blow up. It will do maybe 6 damage on that ATST. Fantastic. And then it will be destroyed. And you will have really accomplished very little with it. Certainly not got the most out of it. So this thing is not an ATST. You cannot just barrel it down the middle of the board in range of not only their ATSTs, but all their other impact weapons and their speeder bikes and whatnot coming down the center. You will lose it very quickly, and you will not get your points worth out of it. So, don't really expect your T-47 to do any work for the first couple of turns. Lesson 3, flank. Flank with your T-47. That is how you want to use your unit. When you want it to be kind of impacting the battle is about turn 3. You have to be okay in Legion with units not really coming into effect until later in the game. Holding back units to be reserves and to do stuff in the late game is super important with Legion. People are still playing it like 40k, right? The idea of 40k is that you do as much damage as quickly as possible with as much as your army in the first and second turn. After that, it's mop-up time, and you just hope that you've done more damage to them than they've done to you. Legion does not play like that. It's a game about moving around. It's a game about capturing objectives. It's a game about deleting units at key times, reducing them past their level of being impactful. And the T-47 is really good at that if it's held back. And if you send it down a flank where the enemy does not have their ATSD, where they don't have sneaky, speeder bikes heading towards you. Look, one-on-one in speeder bikes, it'll do okay. Okay, but if they've got 3 units of speeder bikes heading down a flank, don't send this thing to take them on, all right? It's going to lose really badly. So that's the other thing you need to keep in mind about the T-47 is that it needs support. You can't use it in isolation, but we'll talk about that a little later. In regards to how to play it and what I'm using my T-47 for, kind of 2 main things. The first is an assassination tool, right? So they may have their squishy commander at the back, whether that be Veers or Leia if it's a mirror match, and you use the T-47 to get around the back of the board, come up the flank, and when they least expect it, do a huge move and put 3 red dice and 3 black dice with an aim, if possible, into their commander right at the back. hopefully without a dodge token, hopefully not in range, to utilize Esteemed Leader. Esteemed Leader is just the bane of my existence when using this thing. So, as an assassination tool, if they've made the mistake of not bringing Esteemed Leader to the game, punish them. Punish them with this unit and target their commander when you get a chance. Sure, they may have got kind of what they want to get out of Veers and Leia in those first couple of turns, but having that extra troop unit that's a bit squishy to capture objectives at the end of the game and to still be handing out orders is really important. And if you can take their commander away from them, I would highly recommend it. The other thing you want to do is only reveal your T-47 to kind of one enemy unit at a time, using its maneuverability to do this. You want to use it to put that kind of last 2 or 3 damage onto an ATST before it reaches its resilience value. Same with the ATRTs. Don't target a full health ATST, reveal your T-47, and just go head-to-head. Don't do it, all right? Use your ATRTs to put a bit of damage onto that ATST first, maybe 5 or 6 damage first, and then swoop in with your T-47 and push it past that magic number of 8, hopefully diminishing it in some way so that it then can't turn and shoot because you've come in on its flank, right? So if that works, fantastic. If it doesn't, well, you tried your hardest. You tried to get the most out of it, and at least you used it in a clever way. The last kind of thing I want to point out is whether you dodge or aim. If an anti-armor unit is facing off against your T-47 and it hasn't fired yet, use dodge. Just use it. Do it. I know you want to aim. I know you want to get those rerolls and those attack dice, but you just can't afford to. With Rebels, you need to take dodge tokens. You need to conduct dodge actions. Keep that in mind. All right. But look, if nothing's going to shoot at it this turn, aim away, have all the fun, do as much damage as possible. So that's how to play with the T-47. Let's look at the downsides of it. So there are a bunch of downsides to this unit, which is why we don't see it that common. We don't see it very commonly. There we go. So not having an impact on the game until about turn 3 means that almost a quarter of your army is really being held in reserve. Maybe more if you've got some trooper units that you're zip lining in with whatever that condition is. So it does affect you. You're not going to be doing as much damage to them as maybe they are to you in those first couple of turns. But what it does mean is that you'll have a really strong unit for the end game. And as we've discussed in Legion, that's really impactful and makes a big difference, especially if you can delete their commander when they least expect it. Also, what the T-47 can't do and what the ATST can is work in isolation. You simply can't expect your T-47 to pin down or hold down a flank of the board or a whole side of the board on its own and really take out enemy units. What it needs is some ATRTs to help it out. I would recommend using ATRTs that either have rotary cannons or laser cannons to put some damage onto what you want to get rid of first before you reveal that T-47 or put it within range of being in danger. Don't just send it on its own. Be very strategic with it and use it to mop up more so than as a first strike. It's also expensive. It's 175 points. For the same amount of points, you can get 2 ATRTs. It's only got 1 more health than ATRTs. It's pretty squishy. Sure, it's got armor, but so do ATRTs. So what we see very often is that people would much rather take 2 ATRTs. And you're not necessarily wrong. But once you've got 2 or 3 ATRTs and all you've got left to take are troops, well, maybe you then take an airspeeder. I'd always take 2 ATRTs first, then an airspeeder. So let's talk about the army that I would run this in. I would have 1 airspeeder. I would have 2 ATRTs with laser cannons or rotary cannons, depending on your flavor. And then I would bulk out the rest with troops and Leia. You don't really want to use an airspeeder in an army where you've got Luke. It simply gets too expensive. But if you're not going to run Luke, look, I think Luke's fantastic and I really like him. But if you're not going to run him, run Leia. Run your airspeeder, run some ATRTs, 2 or 3 if you want to go nuts. But if you're running 3 ATRTs and an airspeeder, obviously your troops start to look a bit thin on the ground. So the army I would run it in, 1 airspeeder, 2 ATRTs, bulk troops, and Leia. Now, the big question, is it competitive? And the answer is, in the current meta, probably not. It's just not as good as some other choices out there. which is a shame because the model is fantastic and it's so much fun to play with. But in the future, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Obviously, we've already seen the HQ uplink, which gives it a boost. I don't think that's a mistake from FFG. And now that they've recognized that the airspeeder needs a bit of help, and I assure you they have, who knows what we could see in the future? Hopefully some upgrades that give it a bit more power, a bit more resilience, which is what it really needs to kind of tank oncoming firepower. But also in future metas, not only will we see other upgrades, but we're also going to see other units and potentially powerful melee units. Now, currently, the ability to be immune to melee is just not that great. But if we see future units coming out from FFG for Legion that are really powerful in melee, well, the airspeeder is just going to get better inherently, isn't it? Because those units just won't be able to affect it. So hopefully we see some cool melee units, and that in itself will not only be fun and interesting, but it will make our airspeeders for Rebels a bit better. In the end, as I said, it's a great model, it's a lot of fun to play with, and ask yourself this. How many of your Legion games do you need to win? If the answer isn't all of them, then look at an airspeeder for a bit of fun. If you go into a tournament and you need to win your games because there's just some epic, sweet loot up for grabs, then maybe don't take an airspeeder. But if you're playing with your mates or if you're just playing in casual tournaments, escalation leagues, any of the operations, they're not focused on winning, they're focused on having fun. And I guarantee you with your airspeeder, you're going to have a great time flying this thing around and trying to pull off some shenanigans. So that is the T-47 Airspeeder. Hopefully today you've learnt something. And until next time, may the Force be with you. This video was sponsored by Gatekeeper Games, your key to gaming unplugged, a tabletop store offering a friendly atmosphere for people to buy and play their games in the north of Fitzroy.